a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. The Lovely Bones film. The Lovely Bones is a 2009 supernatural drama film directed by Peter Jackson and starring Mark Wahlberg, Rachel Weisz, Susan Sarandon, Stanley Tucci, Michael Imperioli, and Saoirse Ronan. The screenplay by Fran Walsh, Philippa Boyens and Jackson was based on the award-winning and best-selling 2002 novel The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold. It follows a girl who is murdered and watches over her family from the in-between, and is torn between seeking vengeance on her killer and allowing her family to heal. An international co-production between the United States, the United Kingdom, and New Zealand, the film was produced by Carolynne Cunningham, Walsh, Jackson, and Aimee Peyronnet, with Steven Spielberg, Tessa Ross, Kamins, and James Wilson as executive producers. Principal photography began in October 2007 in New Zealand and Pennsylvania, United States. The film's score was composed by Brian Eno. The Lovely Bones was first released on December 26, 2009, in New Zealand, and then internationally in January 2010. The film's North American release date was changed multiple times, with a limited release on December 11, 2009, and a wider release on January 15, 2010. It was released to mainly mixed reviews from critics. The story and its message were generally criticized, with praise mainly aimed at the visual effects, Peter Jackson's direction, and the performances of Ronan and Tucci. In the film's opening weekend, in limited release, it grossed $116,616, despite only having been screened in 3 theaters, placing it at 30th place on the box office chart. The Lovely Bones grossed over $44 million in North America. The film also received numerous accolades, including Golden Globe, Screen Actors Guild, BAFTA and Academy Award nominations. Plot. In 1973, 14-year-old Susie Salmon dreams about becoming a photographer. One day, Ray, a boy she has a crush on, approaches her at school and asks her out. As Susie walks home through a cornfield, she runs into her neighbor, George Harvey, who coaxes her into his underground den. Inside, Susie becomes uncomfortable and attempts to leave. When he grabs her, the scene fades until she is seen rushing past classmate Ruth Connors, apparently fleeing Harvey's den. The Salmons become worried when Susie fails to return home from school. Her father, Jack, searches for her, while her mother, Abigail, waits for the police. In town, Susie sees Jack, but he does not respond to her when she calls. Susie runs home to find Harvey soaking in a bathtub. After seeing her bracelet hanging on the sink faucet near a bloody shaving razor, Susie realizes she never escaped the den and was murdered by Harvey. Screaming, she is pulled into the in-between that is neither heaven nor earth. From there, Susie watches over her loved ones, unable to let go despite the urging of her new afterlife friend, Holly. Investigating Susie's disappearance with Detective Fenneman, Jack thinks Susie was murdered by someone she knew. He researches neighbors and comes to think Harvey is the killer. Fenneman is unable to find any evidence pinpointing Harvey as a suspect. As Harvey cleaned up, Susie's sister, Lindsay, agrees with Jack's suspicions, but their casework takes a toll on Abigail, and Jack invites Abigail's alcoholic mother, Lynn, to move in with them. Feeling alienated from her husband, Abigail leaves for California. Susie, in her afterlife, learns that Harvey, who has now targeted Lindsay as his next victim, has murdered 6 other girls, including Holly, and that he stuffed Susie's body into a safe in his basement. One night, Jack, carrying a bat, trails Harvey into the cornfield. However, Jack accidentally stumbles across Susie's friend, Clarissa. Her boyfriend, who mistakenly thinks his girlfriend is being assaulted, nearly bludgeons Jack to death as Harvey watches from a hiding spot. As Jack recuperates, Lindsay breaks into Harvey's house looking for evidence that he killed Susie. Upstairs, she finds a notebook containing a sketch of the den, a lock of Susie's hair, and news articles about Susie's disappearance. Harvey returns home and almost catches Lindsay in his house, but she escapes and rushes home to discover that her mother has returned. Not wishing to spoil her parents' reunion, she gives the book to her grandmother, who contacts the police. Harvey has already fled, Having seen Lindsay running from his home, he takes the safe containing Susie's remains with him. Susie's afterlife begins expanding into a larger heaven, and she is greeted by Harvey's other victims, now showing 9, including Susie. She resists Holly's urging to enter heaven along with the others, claiming she has one final thing to do. Meanwhile, Susie's classmates Ruth and Ray are present when Harvey drives up to dispose of the safe at a sinkhole dump site. Susie returns to Earth and enters Ruth's body, causing Ruth to faint. Ray rushes to Ruth's aid only to realize she has become Susie. They kiss, completing Susie's last wish, and she returns to heaven. Meanwhile, Harvey dumps the safe in a sinkhole, leaving it to disappear in the muddy water as he drives away. Sometime later, Harvey meets a young woman outside a diner and offers her a ride, but she rejects him and leaves. A large icicle falls from an overhead branch, hitting Harvey on the shoulder. He loses his balance on the ice and falls backward over a cliff to his death. Time passes, and Susie sees that her family is healing, which Susie refers to as the lovely bones that grew around her absence. As the film concludes, Susie finally enters heaven, telling the audience, "My name is Salmon, like the fish. First name Susie. I was 14 years old when I was murdered on December 6, 1973. I was here for a moment and then I was gone. I wish you all a long and happy life." Production. In May 2000, Film 4 Productions acquired feature film rights to Alice Sebold's novel The Lovely Bones, when it was a half-written manuscript. Producer Aimee Peyronnet had sought to attract studio interest to the manuscript, and an insider informed Film 4's deputy head of production, Jim Wilson, of the project. The company attached Luc Besson and Peyronnet's production company Seaside to the project, 2 years before the novel's release. By February 2001, Lynn Ramsay was hired to direct and write the film adaptation of the novel. In July 2002, Channel 4 shut down Film 4, causing Hollywood studios and producers to pursue acquisition of feature film rights to The Lovely Bones, which had spent multiple weeks at the top of the New York Times bestseller list. The film adaptation, which had been estimated at a budget of $15 million, remained with Channel 4 under its newly developed in-house film unit, with Ramsay still contracted to write and direct. By October 2002, Ramsay was writing the script with fellow screenwriter Liana Dognini, with filming planned for summer 2003. Author Sebold was invited by the producers to provide input on the project. Ramsay, who had read the novel in manuscript prior to publication, said in 2012 that her adaptation departed from it significantly. The scenes with Susie in heaven would have been depicted purely as her father's imagination. He would have become friends with Mr. Harvey, never suspecting him of having killed his daughter. "I really didn't like the My Little Pony, she's in heaven, everything's okay aspect," she told the New York Times in 2012. In July 2003, the studio DreamWorks negotiated a first-look deal with producer Peyronnet, after DreamWorks co-founder Steven Spielberg expressed interest in the project. DreamWorks did not acquire the rights to the novel, and Ramsay was eventually detached from the project as, she says, Film 4 wanted a version more faithful to the novel. In April 2004, producers Peter Jackson, Fran Walsh, and Philippa Boyens entered negotiations to develop the project. Jackson described the book as a wonderfully emotional and powerful story. Like all the best fantasy, it has a solid grounding in the real world. By January 2005, Jackson and Walsh planned to independently purchase film rights and to seek studio financing after a script had been developed. The producers sought to begin adapting a spec script for The Lovely Bones in January 2006, with the goal of script completion and budget estimation by the following May. Jackson explained he enjoyed the novel because he found it curiously optimistic and uplifting, because of the narrator's sense of humor, adding there was a difference between its tone and subject matter. He felt very few films dealt with the loss of a loved one. Jackson foresaw the most challenging element in the novel to adapt was the portrayal of Susie, the protagonist, in her heaven, and making it ethereal and emotional, but not hokey. Saoirse Ronan explained Jackson chose to depict the afterlife as depending on Susie's emotions. Whenever Susie feels happy, heaven is sunny and Therese birds and everything. Whenever it's not so great, it's raining, or she's in the middle of an ocean. Jackson described the book's description of heaven as being an in-between, rather than a true heaven, and said he was not trying to paint a definitive picture of heaven itself. W. Jackson created Susie's Heaven in a 1973 world. He went through the Partridge Family television show archives as a reference. A 120-page draft of the script was written by September 2006. In April 2007, the script was completed by Jackson, Walsh, and Boyens. Jackson intended to direct. The three producers began seeking a studio partner to finance the film adaptation. Besides the major studios, smaller companies including United Artists were also contacted. New Line Cinema was excluded from negotiations because of Jackson's legal dispute with the studio over royalties from his The Lord of the Rings trilogy. Jackson sought a beginning $65 million budget for The Lovely Bones, also requesting from studios what kind of promotional commitments and suggestions they would make for the film adaptation. By May, 4 studios remained interested in the project: DreamWorks, Warner Bros., Sony, and Universal. The Lovely Bones was sold to DreamWorks for $70 million. Paramount Pictures received the rights to distribute the film worldwide. Production began in October 2007 in the U.S. state of Pennsylvania and New Zealand. Shooting in parts of Delaware, Chester and Montgomery counties, including Hatfield, Ridley Township, Phoenixville, Royersford, Malvern, and East Fallowfield, lasted a few weeks, and most of the studio shooting was done in New Zealand. In December 2008, Brian Eno signed on to compose the film's score. Fran Walsh, a big fan of his work, suggested him to Jackson. Jackson had called Eno to request use of 2 of his early tracks to evoke atmosphere for the 1970s scenes in the film. When Eno asked if he could compose the whole score, Jackson was surprised, since he had heard Eno did not like working on films. For the film's ending, Eno uncovered a demo he had done in 1973 and reunited with the vocalist to create a proper version for the film, commenting, "That song from 1973 was finally finished in 2008. In November 2009, Jackson stated that he reshot new footage of Harvey's death scene after test audiences said it was not violent enough and wanted to see more of Harvey in pain. Jackson said it was important to him that the movie receive a page 13 rating so that the film could appeal to the widest possible audience, despite the necessarily violent nature of some scenes. Strategy. The Lovely Bones was originally scheduled for release on March 13, 2009, but it was delayed to December 11, 2009, as the studio became interested in releasing the film for awards season, which gave Jackson an opportunity to make some effects shots larger in scope. The film then received a limited theater release on December 11, 2009, in the United States. The film was originally set to have a wider United States theater release on December 25, 2009, as part of a campaign to build its momentum into January 2010. In early December it was confirmed that the United States release date had been pushed back by 3 weeks to January 15, 2010. Paramount and DreamWorks did not give a reason for the change of the release date. The film premiered in New Zealand on December 26, 2009, and was released in the United Kingdom on January 29 and in other countries in January 2010. According to the Los Angeles Times, Paramount invested $70 million in production and an additional $85 million in worldwide marketing and distribution. In December 2009, the Los Angeles Times described the marketing and promotion of The Lovely Bones as having been a heavy advertising campaign. In late July 2009, as part of the promotion, Jackson talked about the film and screened a 4-minute clip at the San Diego Comic-Con International Film Festival. As part of marketing for the film, in August 2009, people were allowed to enter a contest to win a trip to Wellington for the film's New Zealand premiere on December 14, 2009. The offer included, if the winner lived outside of Wellington, 1 night's accommodation and a voucher for flight or petrol to Wellington. A teaser trailer was released in August 2009, days before the film's official trailer. The official trailer debuted on the television series Entertainment Tonight, and was released online shortly afterwards. In August 2009, Jackson offered a behind-the-scenes look at the film, and discussed elements in the film's plotline. The Los Angeles Times reported that Paramount had originally expected the film to appeal to a sophisticated, adult audience, but after poor revenue and average reviews, the studio decided to redirect the film to an audience in another age group. Surveys showed that the film was favored more by females aged 13-20 than by any other demographic. Paramount began to screen the movie aggressively for high school and college-age girls during its 3-screen limited release. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?